What is up, YouTube? It's Roy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on my quest to brew the magic world. As always, that deck list is going to be down in the description for you below, as I would really appreciate it if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, check out the links in the description, do all that good stuff. But today, back for week 3 of Bloomburrow content, and we're working our way through some more Tribal Commanders this week. We're working through some more stuff, but we're starting off with a color combo and a deck style after my own heart. We're talking about Baylen, Haymaker, a Naya tokens commander. Baylen is a 3-mana rabbit, 4/3 that has 3 separate abilities. After a tokens commander of my own heart that has 3 different abilities. But the first one says we can untap 2 untapped tokens we control to add a mana of any color. Tap 3 untapped tokens we control to draw a card. And tap 4 untapped tokens we control to put 3 counters on Baylen and give it trample until end of turn. There's a lot of ways you could take Baylen, and there's a lot of ways you can look at this. But I think the way that makes the most sense for Baylen is to take advantage of making tokens, right? By adding mana and drawing cards and putting counters. But remember that it doesn't say creature tokens or non-creature tokens. It just says tokens in your notes. If we make food or we make treasures or we make clues or we make anything else, we can tap them for Baylen's abilities. And I think that's important to remember as we take a look at our approach to the deck. That's not necessarily what I chose to focus on. I still feel like Naya tokens decks strive when they focus on swarming the board, buffing that board, and getting in for damage. And that's what we're going to look to do. But Baylen unlocks one specific sub-synergy that I think decks like Jetmir that I love don't do as much, and that's the fact that we have creatures that untap all permanents or all creatures we control on everybody else's upkeep, meaning that we can then use those with Baylen to draw cards, make mana, put counters on it. I think there's a lot of ways we can interact with those. There aren't a ton of those pieces in our colors, so I mean, at the end of the day, it's a very small subsection of our deck. When we see them, we want to prioritize them because I think they're very helpful for what we're trying to do. So we're going to talk about how we're going to make tokens that untap. We're going to talk about damage on ETB, how when we make creature tokens, we can damage our opponents. That's a very common tokens thing, and we're going to take advantage of it. And then, of course, getting into combat, having some fun. Well, as far as making tokens go, I think it'd be very easy to approach this, and we only want to make untapped tokens. I think it'd be very easy to say, I'm only going to make untapped tokens, and I think you're going to leave some of the raw power of token decks on the table. There's a lot of great creatures that make tokens on attack, and some of the best ones, like Adeline there on the left, have to be considered because of how much value they can bring you over the course of a couple turns. Adeline's a star 4, where stars number of creatures we control, and whenever you attack for each opponent, we make a 1/1 human attacking them. Yes, it comes in tapped and attacking, so we can't use it for Baylen, but if we have other abilities set up, damage on ETB, buffs to creature tokens, that kind of thing, these are now coming in and dealing more damage and overall value than just being untapped for the purpose of Baylen. Same thing with Jackrabbit over there on the right, making a number of 1/1 rabbits equal to Jackrabbit's power. Now the cool part about Jackrabbit is they come in untapped, so we can use Baylen's abilities right away for that if we want to. Jacked power, there's plenty of ways in the deck to buff it, but you can bring it in with the counters on it if need be. And then a card in the middle that kind of is the best of both worlds, and the abilities that we really want to relish if we can find them, is Farmer Cotton. A X green and white legendary human peasant that says when it comes in, we make X 1/1 halflings and X food tokens. This is exactly what we want out of token generation spell in this deck, making us basically 2 times X tokens that all can be tapped with Baylen since they come in untapped. And that's one of those things that can lead to a big turn. If we make enough of them, it could really give Baylen a big buff to get in for damage. I think it's easy to just look at tokens and say, oh, well, we need to go wide, we need to go in combat, but this deck can very quickly, depending on how far you can go, threaten Baylen to be a commander damage threat on its own. Queen Alanol is one of my favorite token support pieces because not only is it a star where stars the number of creatures we control, but anytime we make a token, we make an additional white soldier instead. So that's pretty cool because then we're getting extra tokens every time. Fourth Orlingo's over there on the right is the next spell. It's going to make us 2/2 red human knight creature tokens with trample and haste, and then whenever one or more creatures we control deal damage to one or more players this turn, we become the Monarch. The Monarch's okay. I mean, it's helpful, but the point here is we're making a ton of tokens that thankfully have trample and haste so they can get right into the combat. But a card I think fits Baylen really, really well is Wildfire Awakener. So this is a token generating creature. It has Convoke, which is great. We can use our extra tokens to tap to help get the X to be higher. But when it comes in, it makes X 1/1 red elemental creature tokens with when this creature becomes tapped, it deals 1 damage to target player. What I like about this, if you haven't put 2 and 2 together yet, is that every time that elemental taps to attack, taps for Baylen's ability, or taps for any other abilities in the deck, it's going to be dealing a damage to target player, meaning we can kind of just start shotgunning that 1 or 2 damage out every time that happens. And the cool part is that we can have these out and our untappers out. We could be spreading damage out potentially every turn by tapping those elementals, and that's important when we look to start moving towards the mid to late game when we're trying to get damage and combat damage out. Song of Totentans is another one of my favorite new token generation spells. Make X 1/1 black rat creature tokens with this creature can't block, and then all creatures get haste until end of turn. Totentans is one of those spells that ideally you want to dump as much into X as you can. You're going to get all the rats, and then you can immediately tap them with Baylen for its abilities. So it's kind of a win-win. Otherwise, you put a bunch of rats onto the battlefield that can attack this turn if you need to trigger other things, and just go for it. Temp with Bunnies and Temp with Vengeance are both what we refer to as temp spells. What that means is you get to do an ability, and then you give your opponent the option to do the same thing, and if they do, you get to do it. So with Temp with Bunnies, you get to draw a card and make a rabbit creature token. And each opponent may do it, and if they do, you get to do it. And then Temp with Vengeance, the strictly better one, you get to make X 1/1 red elemental creature tokens with haste. You give your opponents that option, and if they do, you do it. With both of these spells, our hope are that we give our opponents this choice, and if they take it, we can do more with the stuff they give us back, rather than the stuff we gave them. And that's dangerous in some games, but we're hoping to do more often than not be able to really do that and take advantage of it. March of the Multitudes is another great token generation spell because you can convoke, meaning you can use your creatures to help pay for it, and you just make X 1/1s with lifelink. I love this because at instant speed on somebody else's turn, or even that end step before our turn, we just tap all of our creatures down, use all our mana up, make a bunch of tokens that we can then use immediately on that end step, still to draw cards with Baylen if we need to, or just come back to our turn with a bunch of extra 1/1s ready to go. Horn of Valhalla plays kind of a double role in the deck. The adventure side is just going to make us a bunch of tokens, which is great. But then when it comes down, we can equip it to Baylen and make Baylen bigger for every creature we control. And remember, Baylen gives itself trample every time we put those counters on it, meaning that it then can become a bigger and bigger commander damage threat. Rabble Rousing is another one of my favorite token enchantments that I've had the privilege of playing. Comes in with Hideaway 5, so you go to the top 5, and you can exile one of them face down and put the rest on the bottom. It says whenever you attack with one or more creatures, you make that many 1/1 citizen creature tokens. Then, if you control 10 or more creatures, you can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. This is important for 2 things. 1, you could potentially play a card for free. But 2, that happens every time you attack, meaning that if you have enough creatures attacking, you could be making enough 1/1 citizens to use Baylen's abilities every turn. Give it that buff every turn. Draw a card, make some extra mana that turn. There's a lot of ways you can approach Rabble Rousing, but what I like is that it gives you that option, and it's more or less with enough creatures going to always enable Baylen's third ability to give it trample each turn. Well, as far as untapping our creatures go, remember, we can untap all creatures, right? All 3 of these cards are going to untap all of our creatures. But remember, we want to untap those tokens, as many tokens as we can, so we can tap them again. Drumbellower and Quest for Renewal are only going to untap all creatures we control during each other player's untap step, which is a bit of a downside, right, if we're making tokens that aren't creatures. But I think we'll still take it, especially with how much I've kind of spun this deck towards creature tokens. And then Seaborn Muse is just going to untap all permanents we control during each other player's untap step. Mana. Our mana rocks, our lands, our creatures, our tokens that aren't creatures. I mean, all 3 of these are immensely helpful, and I think it's important to protect these pieces when we see them so we can get multiple things of value on multiple people's turns. Well, as far as damage on ETB goes, I mean, we're playing more than just these 3, but these are the 3 main big ones. You have Agate Instigator, a 2-mana lizard rogue with offspring. That means that if you have it and its offspring token down, whenever a creature comes in, we're dealing 2 damage to each opponent. Perforos does the same, 2 damage to each opponent, and can give a small buff to our creatures if we want to for the mana. And then War Leader's Call is kind of the best of both worlds, dealing 1 damage to each opponent when a creature comes in, and buffing all of our creatures, which is great because, I mean, at the end of the day, I would much rather have 10 2/2s than 10 1/1s. So even that simple +1/+1 buff for 3 mana can really go a long way the wider and wider our board goes. But Okay, we talked about the tokens, we talked about untapping them, we talked about damage at ETB. Let's do the Naya thing, let's do that good thing, and let's get in for damage. How are we going to turn our board of tokens plus Baylen into damage? Well, the cool part is the front page of this is our 3 really fun ways to do it. On the left, you have Champion of Lambhole, a human that says that creatures of power less than it cannot block creatures we control, and every time a creature comes in, it gets a +1/+1 counter. It does not take very long to get Lambhole out of control to the point that our opponent may not be able to block us at all, and that's the goal. And then it doesn't take very long for us to turn that into raw damage. Over on the right, we have Beastmaster Ascension, an enchantment that says whenever a creature we control attacks, we get to put a quest counter on it. And then as soon as we get 7 quest counters on it, all our creatures get +5/+5. Those 1/1s turn into 6/6s and become a whole lot harder to deal with. And then, well, the Naya Tokens Commander out of my own heart welcomely sees a place in this deck, and that's Jetmir, Nexus of Rebels. Again, another Naya Commander with 3 abilities, but these aren't activated abilities, these are static abilities. If we have 3 or more creatures, all of our creatures get +1/+0 in Vigilance. If we have 6 or more creatures, they also get +1/+0 in Trample, and if we have 9 or more creatures, they also get +1/+0 in Double Strike. So +3/+0, Vigilance, Trample, and Double Strike if we have 9 creatures is a very easy way to end the game, and this deck has a great way to go wide and make sure that we're always getting up to 9 creatures, and we do have 1 or 2 ways to look for Jetmir as a potential finisher for ending out the game. Caretaker's Talent might look odd because its first 2 abilities are about drawing cards when tokens come in and making a token, but if you get it to level 3, all creature tokens get +2/+2. It may be a slightly higher rate than some of the other ways we have to just give everyone +1/+1, like something with Intangible Virtue over there on the right. But I mean, drawing a card whenever we make a token each turn is very helpful, considering we can potentially make tokens on other people's turn and draw a card that way. Photo Retreat there in the middle is kind of a dual duty. When a land comes in, we can either make a token or put a counter on each creature we control and give them Vigilance. I love the second mode, especially the wider we go. That could be brutal, just to take a big attack and know that we could still block or still tap them for Baylen's ability even after they declare those attacks. I think that's the biggest way that this pops off with Baylen, is you take a big attack, they have Vigilance, they don't tap to attack, and then you can tap them for Baylen's ability, put counters, draw cards, add mana to play a trick or a protection spell. I think there's so many great ways to take advantage of this Vigilance at all when you're talking about our creature tokens, so they can attack and use the abilities. Well, I've said it before on the show and I'll say it again, no deck's ever complete. This is just our version 1.0 shot at the deck list. And a lot of the times, the deck ends up not being complete for 1 or 2 reasons. 1, I don't ever firmly believe that a deck's done the first time you get done with it. There's always things you can learn in testing. And 2, well, sometimes budget's a concern. And for 2 of the 3 cards on this screen, budget was the concern. I do try my best on these decks that I brew for the show to not get above a certain threshold if I can. I know not everybody wants to build $700-800 decks and have that be their meta. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's hard to want to spend $20 on a card if it doesn't always, in your mind, lead to a good outcome. And for the left 2 cards on the screen, that's the reason why they weren't included. I love Charismatic Conqueror. I've seen it work so many times in the games that I've played, but it's an $18 2-mana 2/2 soldier that relies on your opponents to give you tokens in order for it to work, and that can be kind of hard, although it kind of gives this cool blind obedience effect that your opponents have to be okay with. They can have that thing come in untapped, but if they do, you get a 1/1 for it, and we can most certainly pay more, right, a value of those 1/1s than our opponents could with their untapped permanents. Awake in the Woods is a card I really love. This is a card I've seen work so many times. Last I checked, it sits at about $20, which for an X generation spell could be tough. But the upside is all of those tokens are lands. They tap for green on future turns, which is very helpful. Again, this could just as easily come back in for one of the ones we talked about earlier. I just wanted to leave some room in the budget in case you decide to go elsewhere. And then Grand Crescendo is on here because I love protection spells, especially in token decks. We're playing the Flawless Maneuver and the Clever Concealment of the world. We're spending the good money there. But if we wanted to add another one that can potentially make us tokens, I think Grand Crescendo is worth it. It's always tough to know how many spots that you commit to protection spells. Now, we'll give the caveat that Grand Crescendo also makes tokens, so it's kind of double duty. But I mean, at the end of the day, you have to determine what those ratios are the best in your deck for making tokens, protection, and regular creatures and what have you, and work with the ratios that work best for you as you draw and playtest in Goldfish. But for me, I didn't think we needed another one, but I could understand if you do. So let's get into our first playtest. Keeping a 2-lander with an Arcane Signet, Intangible Virtue, Innkeeper's Talent from the new set, getting lots of love, protects creatures with counters on them, puts counters on creatures. Ginny Fae, one of my favorite Naya token legends, can allow us to make the tokens we make into cats or dogs instead, and then a Parallel Lives to double. So this is a great hand. All we need is a couple more pieces of mana, and we are going to shine. Turn 1, we draw Pest Infestation, which is a very interesting card. It can destroy artifacts and enchantments and make twice X 1/1 Pest. So a way to make some tokens and get rid of some things. Turn 2, we will get that mountain down and get that Arcane Signet down. I mean, we could have played the Innkeeper's Talent, but I think we'd rather try to get Baylen down and get it started. Turn 3, we don't draw land, but that's okay. I think we slam Baylen down here. At least get it on board, get it started. We could have seen, I guess, an argument for something like Tireless Provisioner or Ginny Fae here on turn 3, but I like Baylen, and we'll see what we draw into turn 4. Turn 4, no land, which is kind of brutal, but we'll just play the Tireless Provisioner. Well, I guess, or we could do the talent, and let's do that. Let's do the talent. Let's get it up so Baylen has Ward 1, put the counter on it, and at the start of combat, get into somebody with a 5/3. But again, now Baylen at least has Ward 1 and it's a little bit protected. Jeez. Gotta love it when Moxfield and your playtest things screw you over. But that's A-okay. It is what it is. I'll play Ginny Fae here, and then just put a counter on Ginny Fae just to protect her a little bit. Get another value engine started. Take another attack with Baylen here on turn 5. This is going to be a slow one. Well, we got Farmer Cotton. We just don't have the mana for it. I'll play the War Leader's Call. Put another counter on Baylen this turn and get into attacking. This is kind of brutal not having that third land, but that's the thing with gold fishing is playtesting gold fishing is sometimes you're going to get it, sometimes you're going to not, and it's good to get these looks where you don't have it. Jetmir's Garden's going to come and tap, so we're still at 3 mana. I guess I could have played the Provisioner right before it and gotten a treasure, so let's do that, just for the purposes of here. Let's play the treasure. Let's get the treasure. Not that we're going to do anything with the treasure, but we could leave the Plowshares open. I'll put another counter on Ginny Fae here, make it a little bit bigger. Now, when we made this treasure, we could have chosen to make a creature instead. Like, we could have made a dog or a cat, but I think I'd rather have the treasure just to open up some mana options for this Plowshares on somebody else's turn. That will get a damage off the Provisioner there for War Leader's Call. And here we go. Now our lands are coming in strong. I'm going to make the treasure again, just because it can open up more mana for this Farmer Cotton. So I got to pay 2 into it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let me think about this. Remember, I have to tap the treasures to sack them, so I can't tap them with Baylen and then sack them, which would be really great. But we're going to Farmer's Cotton for 5. What this is going to do is make me 5 halflings and 5 foods. Now, I have my choice. With the halflings, I can bring them in as... Let me actually start over, because this is important and I might want to do this. So I can make any of those, or any amount of those, into cats or dogs. So cats with haste or dogs with vigilance. I think what I'm going to do is make the halflings into cats with haste and make the foods into dogs with vigilance. That's 11 triggers a War Leader's Call this turn, doling out some damage. And then now... we have all these attackers, right? We have these 3/3s with haste that can get in for damage if we want to. We also can now tap them for Baylen's ability. So we made 10, so we could activate Baylen twice, getting up to a 12 this turn. Take a good shot at somebody. Here, I guess I'll put the token or the counter on Tireless Provisioner just to protect it a little bit. I mean, at this point, Farmer Cotton kind of did what it needed to do. We wouldn't mind if it got removed. I think I would go to combat. I really wish they had vigilance. It would make it even better, right? Because if I attack with all the cats, I've only got, 2 mana's worth of things to do? I guess I could, before combat, tap 4 of these and play the Intangible Virtue, right? Right, tap 4 of the dogs here to add 2 mana for the Intangible Virtue. Now all these could attack for free, right? Now they're 4/4s, right? So do that, attack here. We could always, again, buff Baylen if need be, but I'd kind of rather keep up something like Second Harvest to do on my opponent's turn. And again, if nobody wipes here and there's nothing else that anyone's going to do in any of our turns, any of their turns, yeah, it's just, what, just 3 mana, right? Because we put all the mana into Cotton. I'd probably just, what, draw 2 twice? Or draw 1 twice. And then, you know, there's Jetmir for plenty lethal. But there's a couple other ways we could have gone there. I was trying to hold up mana for like Swords to Plowshares. So I was hoping we'd have enough for the second harvest, but we didn't. But again, Jetmir's just plenty lethal there. But again, took us a little bit to get into the mana there. But I think we finally found that position where we could see what we were doing. Here we go, Playtest 2, keeping a 5-lander with an Innkeeper's Talent and Lambholt. This is going to kind of take the opposite approach, right, where we try to set up the goods this way. We'll get the Path of Ancestry untapped, because I think we're just going to spend our first turn or two here putting in tap things. We see Burrow Guard Mentor, which isn't bad. It gets bigger for the amount of creatures we control. If I do this, I can get Baylen down turn 3, or I could get Lambholt down turn 3. But I kind of only have 2 mana for a couple turns. We'll do that. We'll play the Beauregard Mentor. It does share a type with Baylen, so we get to scry. I really like River Cleaver. We'll leave that one on top. Turn 3 here, I'd really like to get Lambholt down, so I'd probably do that. Get Lambholt down. It's a warrior. Thankfully, it shares a type with Baylen, so we get to scry 1. I like the Sundown Pass. We'll keep it there. And Burrow card could take an attack as a 2/2 if we want this turn. But that's okay. What we're trying to do really is make sure that we're getting value down, right, on each of these turns as best we can. Here, I mean, I can play Baylen. I kind of feel like we should take the turn here on the Jetmir's Garden. Play Baylen. We scry 1 because Baylen shares a type with itself. We see a Pest Infestation. I like it. It could get us some tokens here in the coming turns. Lambholt gets a counter, so now creatures with power 2 or less can't block us, or 1 or less can't block us. Mentor's a 3/3. We could take an attack here, and I think now on our turn here, turn 5, we've got 5 mana now. We could Pest Infestation for 2 in each X. That would destroy up to 2 target artifacts or enchantments if people have been laying around, and make us 4 pests. We could get Innkeeper's Talent down and maybe like something like Halo Fountain down, and soup up our creatures a little bit more. I kind of like the Pest Infestation. The cool part, remember, about Pest Infestation is we don't have to actually destroy any. We could just make the 4 pests, and that's going to put Champion Lambhold up to a 6/6 now, and I imagine not a lot's going to be able to block us on turn 5. We'll have pretty good attacks with this Mentor that's now 7/7. You know, just take the attacks we can and move on to our next turn here. We put that Canopy Vista untapped. Unfortunately, we can't avoid that one. But there's a couple of routes we can go. We could get Reaver Cleaver attached to something like Lambholt and just net a bunch of treasures. We could go Halo Fountain into Innkeeper's Talent and start protecting, you know, Baylen and Champion of Lambholt. There's probably a lot of arguments to go either way. I like the Reaver Cleaver because it's going to give us a bunch of mana and allow us to potentially like go into Secure the Waste. So what I'd probably do is just go 3 into Reaver Cleaver, 3 to attach it to Lambholt. So now Lambholt's a 7/7. We had to use 2 of the pests to do that, remember, because that Canopy Vista came in tapped. Move to combat. Again, nothing's blocking these 3. Hit in, and I'm more than sure we probably just make 7 treasures here. Because, I mean, I don't see any world where somebody blocks them. We can use a couple of them if we want, but I'd kind of rather wait and use them for Secure the Wastes, just to make a bunch more tokens. But I kind of want to use... Well, we're after combat, aren't we? So I won't get to put the counter on with Innkeeper's Talent, right? Because it is at the start of combat. I think I'll wait, try to go around the board, because what I can do is I have 7 treasures and I have 2 pests, meaning I have 8 mana. I can Secure the Wastes basically for 7, which would be my goal. Make 7 1/1 white warriors. What that's going to do is add a bunch more to the Lambholt. And now, I mean, unless someone can stop Lambholt, we can just net a ton of mana. We are so close to this Halo Fountain. We're at 11. And we have to untap 15 tap creatures, which actually, we actually would be able to do this turn if we paid 3 for the fountain, went to combat and completely swung out. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Sorry, we're 14 creatures. I was going to say if we had 15, we'd have it. But again, now the problem is we could tap all these for Baylen if we wanted, since it's getting in untapped. I think we're in a good position here where you can kind of see where we'd move towards the end game. But let me know, what do you think of Baylen down in the comment section below. It's not my favorite Naya tokens commander in the world. I still think I like Jetmir better, but I see a lot of the fun of Baylen. I think it's a commander that if you want to take more advantage of the non creature tokens and tapping them and getting value, I think Baylen's well worth it. So I'd love to know what you think you would do differently down in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys next.